welcome back, Woo Crew. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk a bit about smoke cleansing and medicine and plant medicine in general. And I'm really excited to bring you the content that we have laid out for you today.
I'm so excited to chat about these topics.
So we're continuing our talk on sacred tools. If you haven't listened to the other episodes, we've talked about altar building. We've talked about our spirit guides. We've also talked about Oracle and Tarot, and we are just continuing this conversation on sacred tools that we use and that you too can incorporate into your life. As a gentle reminder of something that we've said before, we're just outlining some tools. If you don't use them, you don't use them. If you use other ones, great. Let us know which ones you do use. And this is just an opportunity for you to learn about maybe something that you don't already use.
Maybe we use something a bit differently than you use it and you want to experiment, or you want to let us know how you differ and we can experiment.
Yeah, exactly. So shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to start us off talking about smoke medicine, smoke cleansing. And I think that we need to start this discussion always by talking about the term smudge, because it is a term that is widely used, and it's a term that is problematic when it is being used by non-Indigenous folks, so people who aren't Indigenous to North America. The term smudge is a term that is sacred and specific to practices that the Indigenous folks of North America use. And so it is best to avoid using this term. This is not our term. Unless you are Indigenous, then please use it. But, we can say other things instead. So smoke medicine is a lovely overarching term to use. If you're burning herbs of any description, smoke medicine covers it all. Or if you know what your heritage or your lineage is, you can kind of dive down that rabbit hole of finding the term that would have been used by your ancestors. So for me, I'm of Celtic descent, and seining is the term for burning dried herbs. And then just a brief touch on white sage as well. So this is what is traditionally used by Indigenous peoples as their smudge ceremony, as part of smudge. And the plant itself is sacred. The plant isn't off limits to us. It's not like we can't use white sage, but it's just about being really mindful about where you're sourcing it. It has been over harvested to the point of extinction because of its rampant popularity in New Age and spiritual communities, which are largely white folks. You want to make sure you're checking in where your herbs are coming from. This goes for all herbs, but especially with this particular herb. And making sure that you're buying it from Indigenous owned stores, or a store that's sourcing it from and then giving back to the Indigenous population where they're getting it from. Or if you're gifted it, often we will be gifted if we are lucky enough to be invited into some of these ceremonies with Indigenous folks. Then we might end up with a gift of white sage, and that's beautiful. Side note, culinary sage smells just as pretty, and you can grow it in your garden or buy it from the grocery store too. So it's an option if you're wanting to be extra careful or you don't have an Indigenous shop nearby that you can source from. It's really interesting as we move into like smoke medicine and using it and how we go about sourcing it. The idea of having like a smudge stick, and I'm using that term very intentionally because that is what we have in North America, that stick of really tightly bundled herbs is actually, again, very specific to North American Indigenous traditions. Not to say that you can't create your own smoke medicine bundle stick because it burns cool, you can hold it while it's lit. But most cultures, the tradition would be to either throw like a burn bundle, so a loosely bundled up herbs, or just totally loose and dried herbs on the fire, or to burn them as incense, so either in stick form or loose incense on a charcoal puck. That's way more common throughout time and history. But the practice is really ancient, so it's very accessible. I really like smoke medicine because no matter what your history or heritage, if you follow it back and look for the traditions, you're gonna find smoke medicine. You're gonna find burning plants that have been dried. You're going to find burning woods that are resinous or resins themselves. In Egypt, you think about they used smoke as part of the embalming process. Things like frankincense and myrrh, the resin in them were really important for keeping people from getting sick. Their antibacterial properties. All through Europe, there'd be traditions of hanging different herbs in windows, indoors as protection. Really interestingly, the same herbs that people would hang in their doors for protection were often also associated with witchcraft once we got into the burning times. And so it was this weird juxtaposition where, like, if you're caught growing and using these herbs, maybe you're a witch, but also you would hang them in your doorway to protect yourself from a witch.
We should go back to the Hammer of the Witches and see where the fine line is there as to what you can have hanging versus if you start burning them.
You can see where it really is just the patriarchal powers that were trying to wrest control. We're taking this folk knowledge and folk wisdom about the plants that kept us healthy and then turning it against the people that they didn't want, wresting control from them or keeping the power that they had.
And herein lies the quintessential definition of the patriarchy, people. FTP.
As far as like what you might choose to burn or how to burn, it's going to be, as we keep saying, what calls to you? What are you interested in? I've been kind of in relationship with yarrow for a little while now because it called to me. I really like the flower. It's beautiful. It's easy to grow. It is indigenous to where I live in North America. Yarrow grows all across North America. And the history of it is really cool. So I really enjoyed kind of digging in and engaging and growing, and now I'm drying it. And so soon I'll be able to burn it, the stuff that I've grown myself. So sometimes it's like that cultivating of a longer relationship with a plant that's really fun. Any plant that feels like, oh, this feels like it has significance to me, or it grows near me, or my ancestors used it, or it was a really common herb in my mom's pantry. Like there's all sorts of reasons why you might be drawn to an herb. And we obviously aren't going to go into what each and every one represents here today, because that would be a whole university course lecture. But you can start to play around with them. Do you have any herbs that are your favorite to work with and to burn, Ellie?
Yeah, I do have some favorites. I do burn sage, and I have a beautiful bundle of sage and roses. Any floral for me, like any floral that I can bundle up or use in my smoke ceremony is just like, that's my number one preference. I also have two bundles here. One of them is Yerba Santa and one of them is mugwort. And mugwort is probably one of my favorites as well. And as we clear out, I use smoke for the clearing and the cleansing of things, as smoke is a cleansing practice. I love that you can pick and choose purely based on like what calls to you, and you can also pick and choose based on what the properties of the plant is and the intention that you have for smoke cleansing. So this is a great way to choose.
I love that you pulled mugwort too as an example, because it is an herb that's associated with the divine feminine and kind of cultivating that side of things. I'm actually using mugwort and sage in my upcoming Samhain ritual, which will be over by the time you're listening to this. Sage is a masculine energy. It's the divine masculine. And so that lovely balance as we move into the dark is something that I'm pulling into this Samhain ceremony.
How beautiful.
And being aware, like I love having loose herbs to burn, and I always have on my desk just kind of like a revolving door of whatever I'm throwing in there. Rose petals, lavender, I grow both those things as well. And then I've got cedar in there. Cedar, again, is indigenous to North America. It's actually from all over. I learned some really cool things about cedar, actually.
Tell me.
The cedar that we have here in North America, we call it cedar, but it's not actually cedar. It's from a different family. And juniper is the same family. So juniper and like the big cedar trees that we have here, they are the same family as each other. Whereas true cedar is actually from around Lebanon and those areas of the world. So we use the word cedar, and it really just the shared feature is that it's an aromatic wood. And the resins and the oils give that fragrance and make it really resistant to insects and rot. And so all cedars, whether they're quote unquote true cedars or North American cedars, have that property. And that's part of why they're sacred, is because they don't rot, and they smell really good and fragrant, and they have all those antiseptic properties to them as well. A word of caution: if you are burning herbs and you're playing around and experimenting, something that's worth knowing is that herbs in the mint family smell horrible when you burn them. Like, they stink. So you're thinking like your mint, your lemon balm, your salvia, that kind of stuff, definitely a use for them. Like, they have great properties. There's a lot of reasons why you might choose to burn them, but just being aware that when they burn, they stink. They're smelly.
I actually want to segue from here to talk about something that you just led us down this road. So we have this smoke cleansing practice, but I also want to bring into this discussion how useful all of these things that we are talking about are in a cleansing bath. So use your mint family in a cleansing bath. So using the herbs that we've already talked about, cedar in the bath, even cedar next to the bath, like in a bundle as it's steamed, similar to eucalyptus, like getting that aroma, grounding through aroma is so magical, for lack of a better term. It's so powerful. And so anything that you're also potentially growing or using for your smoke bundles, use them if this calls to you in a bathing ritual, which is a cleansing ritual in and of itself. And so you can cut things either fresh or dried and put them in your bath. You can add in things like, right now I have some rose quartz and smoky quartz that are sitting with a candle beside my bath. But use your herbs in the bath as a practice for cleansing, as a practice for getting in there and smelling good, you know? Mm-hmm. This is the fine line between like witchery and regular folk, if you will, muggles. The muggle term is that you just want a relaxing bath, and the witchery term is like, we are setting a potion up here, okay, people?
Intention. If you're putting herbs and things in your bath, you probably want to make sure that you've got some sort of strainer thing when you drain it into the drain, so that you're not clogging your drain.
That's a seriously hot tip. I also recommend you can put them in an old sock, or you can put them in an old or not old pantyhose. And that is a way that you can just tie that to your tap and then have it flush through the herbs that you have in your bathtub right now.
Or even just like making some tea sachets. Like, if you have loose tea bags that you buy that are compostable, and you just fill them up with some of what you want, pop them in the bath, let them soak, get into your tea bath.
Brilliant.
I love having a bath, and this is going to segue really beautifully for us with bath bombs that have herbs in them. So rose petals or calendula petals or bath salts. I often make bath salts for Christmas gifts with lavender and calendula and things from my garden, and essential oils, because that makes your skin feel so good. I remember growing up, I could never figure out why people liked bath bombs. I still don't for most of them, because I find a lot of them over-scented with not natural scents. They're really smelly. And I always felt like they were drying. I couldn't figure it out. And then I came across a company called Pranic Forest. They were originally based in Calgary. They're now in Vernon. If you live in Vernon, you need to go. You can actually go online too. This isn't an affiliate, but someday we hope it might be. And their bath bombs, I remember putting one in my bath and just being like, what is this magic? She's a witch and I don't know what she does, but the amount of essential oils and petals and stuff in there, my skin, I just couldn't stop touching myself. My whole skin was just like this velvety, soft delight. It makes for cleaning the tub after a little bit tricky, but
of course,
it's worth it. It's worth it.
Of course.
It's and totally you are the oil expert, so I love to kind of segue this. Why are essential oils so magical? Why are they so potent? Why do they make this bath bomb an elevated experience?
I refer to essential oils as plant medicines. And let's talk first a little bit about what essential oils are and like how much time do we have? Sit down, come closer. Sweet child, come closer. First, let's talk about how essential oils are made, because I think this is really important. And I think that, similar to why we don't use white sage like it used to be used, I think that essential oils also have a moment in time for themselves to talk about quality and accessibility. So essential oils essentially are a steaming process that you take the raw plant and you distill it into the essence of the plant, which is so good. And that also means that you use way less of it compared to, say, if you were to use something in your bath, like some cedar in your bath, let's say. There's also a really good reference to this of like, when we use fresh herbs, we probably use 2.5 times the amount of fresh herb versus when we use a dried herb. So it's the same thing with essential oils. So I want to say, like everything, we can have an overuse of them and we can have a wonderful plant medicine experience of them. So using essential oils in your practice, now I want to still come back to this. When we talk about the quality of essential oils, quality matters because the essential oil industry is essentially adulterated. It's just anybody can put any sort of chemical in a bottle, in a little brown bottle, and call this an essential oil. And because we have the ability to make these fragrances in a lab or in a kitchen, really, then pop them in some sort of carrier oil and call that an essential oil. That's not the same as like a plant medicine. So I highly recommend that you know where your essential oils come from. And some curious bits about essential oils before we even get into the medicinal properties of this and why we should use them. Some curious things about essential oils is that depending on where your oil is grown will also change the medicinal quality of the oil. So something like lavender that's grown in your backyard is not going to be the same medicinal quality as lavender that is grown in Bulgaria or France, for example. And the reason for this is that we have plants very similar to how we have plants in our home. If we have a plant that needs full sun and we have it in a semi-shaded place, it's not going to live up to its full capacity. If we're using essential oils for medicinal purposes, the interesting part about how the plant grows is that the harsher the climate, the better the essential oil. And what I mean by harsher the climate, I mean say, for example, it gets roughed up a little bit, like it's windy, or it gets some sort of extreme heat, for example, depending on what oil or what plant it is. The more resilient the plant gets, the higher the qualities are of the essential oil, which is really great.
That's like wine.
Kind of like delicious wine, yes. I also want to say, if your essential oil says do not ingest, you're not going to ingest it. And I also want to know if it says like not for topical use, if you are using it in a diffuser, let's say, for example, because one of the most common ways that we can use plant medicine is to diffuse it and to get the emotional properties of the oil or the grounding properties of the oil. If it says do not put on your skin, well, when it gets distilled, it's breaking up into tiny little particles that we're then ingesting through our olfactory system or through our nasal passage. And so there's a concern there for me. So for me, high quality oils is the only way that I like to go. Now, that's the lecture on know your oil. Know your oil.
Mm-hmm. And can I just note there too that piece about using it on your skin, if you're using an undiluted oil on your skin, you'd have to be really careful, even if it is a high quality oil, right? If you get like a roll-on, say you go to Sage and buy yourself an essential oil roll-on, it's diluted even further in a carrier oil. Mm-hmm. So you're not putting like full potency essential oils on your skin that could have an adverse reaction.
Yeah. So because you talked about this, let's talk about flashing. Flashing with essential oils. Something as simple as lavender, whenever we place it on our skin, if we place it undiluted on our skin, it's supposed to be a super healing oil, but actually it can cause an adverse reaction. And this is part of flashing. So what happens is the oil starts to try to absorb into the air as it's trying to also absorb into your skin. And we have this moment of like confusion that happens, if you will, with the oil. The benefit to diluting your oils before you put them on your skin, when you dilute it, it will do two things. It will stay on the surface of your skin longer. So if you're using it for topical use, like you want it to smell as a perfume, say, for example, then it will stay on your skin longer because it's not being absorbed as quickly. And the second thing is that as it does get absorbed, it's like a nice, gentle drip of oil instead of this flash that we're talking about.
Right.
So yeah, I highly recommend, no matter what, dilute your pure oils before you use them topically. 100%. Okay, let's talk about the different oils and properties, or how you can use them as plant medicine. So again, disclosure, if your oil says do not ingest, you are not going to ingest them. But the first way that I use my essential oils is often through ingestion. So I use them for specific ailments that I may be experiencing. Let's keep this like above board, and so that the FDA, or the Canadian version of the FDA, is not going to come after us.
Yeah.
Anything that I might be experiencing that plant medicine can help with. And especially at this time of year, we can see a lot of things that clove and cinnamon and orange and peppermint and lavender. You know, peppermint is something that can either reduce some inflammation or it can calm the system down. Same thing with lavender. We see it as a nervine or a calming oil. Clove is a really good essential oil for the immune system. Like all of these immune supporting oils at this exact moment in time, whenever we need those, this is a great way to use them. And to ingest your oils, there's a lot of different ways that you can use them. You can use them in a culinary experience, much like you use herbs. You can also add them to some honey or to some water or in a capsule. And all of those things are part of our plant medicine traditions. And I want to say, if you are somebody who's not comfortable with ingesting essential oils, don't do it. It's the same reason that, like, if you're not somebody who's comfortable burning plants in your house, don't do it. Then you have topical use for things. So you can make perfumes that ground you into this present moment. So every essential oil has an emotional property that goes with it. So things like lavender is the oil of communication. And so if we're having difficult conversations, it's really great to use lavender on your throat chakra so that you have this guide, this ally is really what the plant medicine is. It's an ally that we can use in our life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love lavender because it is, I didn't know the communication piece, but it's one of my go-tos for both as an oil to diffuse, also as an herb, like to burn, also as tea. And it's really calming. It's like almost not a sedative, but it's an anti-anxiety. Yeah, it's a nervine, and it's anti-anxiety. It really helps promote sleep and rest and calm, and it's really good for your lungs. So like it's, if you have bad chest cold or something, boiling some water, putting a few drops of lavender essential oil in the water, and then steaming your face over it can really help.
Yeah. Add a little peppermint in there too to get rid of some phlegm, and you're golden. There's multiple things that you can think of. And if we look, it's the same thing whenever we use plants for burning. Like we want the essence of the quality of the plant itself, and then we can start to apply it to, like, what does this do? You know, peppermint is the oil of the buoyant heart. And so this is an oil that you can use for uplifting. If we think about that emotional quality, we have cedarwood, which is the oil of community. Arbor vitae, which is the giant red cedar tree that we have out here on the West Coast, especially, which is just like, it's an oil that immediately reminds me of my father. In its purest form, it almost has this motor oil smell to it, like diesel motor oil. And as somebody who was a logger, my father was a logger, it just instantly brings me back to him. And we have oils like frankincense, which reminds me, let's speak to the ancient use of essential oil. We have histories that bring us back to the ancient myrrhphores, which were the priestesses that were anointing priestesses that carried around these alabaster jars of oil. And we think about, Mary Magdalene was someone who had an alabaster jar of oil that she used to anoint the feet of Jesus or Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is just such a beautiful practice that we can use as a topical practice of essential oils. And this is an ancient practice. We have 9 ancient oils, and frankincense, myrrh, copaiba. There's 9 ancient oils that originally we started to use for anointing practices. And so we can use anointing oils for things like transitions. We can also use anointing oils just for every day. Just before recording this podcast, I put on an oil, which I do every time I record a podcast. I use oil so much, and the oil that I used was the wisdom oil, and I'll link that line of oils. It's with the priestess school that I'm part of. They have a whole line of oils. There's 13. It's a 13-moon mystery school of Rosa Mystica, and that line of oils all lines up with our chakra system. And then there's transition oils, like when people are passing.
I like that you brought up the story of Mary Magdalene and the anointing, because I came across that when I was doing my research for my smoke medicine and herbal practices class. Within my course of Unleash Your Inner Witch, we do a whole day on plant medicine. And that was one of the stories that I read. It's so cool how ancient it is.
Yeah, it's really 2 things with plant medicines is that we've moved away because of fear, because we have these adulterated oils that are just like garbage and create reactions. And so there's this hysteria. We're back in the hysteria times of like, don't use our ancient knowledge. We need to fear this. And really, we need to use it as an ally. We need to understand how it works. Mm-hmm. And when you understand how it works, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's really nothing to be afraid of. So yeah, the Miraphors used essential oils all the time to anoint people. And very similar to how you would go to your healer or go to your shaman, you would come to the Miraphors and they would literally help you through these transition times. And the transitions are when we move from maiden to mother or mother to crone, birthing your baby. There's a huge transition that happens there just in the birth process. As people are passing away, like how beautiful is it to be literally honored, like the devotion that we can have as we anoint you with oils is just such an absolutely beautiful practice.
Mm-hmm. I loved using essential oils in my practice as a midwife. I carried them. Clary sage, particularly helpful for labor if it was stalling out, but I carried several, as well as a tincture that was called Easy Birth. Actually, we had a homeopathic tincture as well as just the little pellets that we used that was to help promote and ease birth. And then a fun little trick that a midwife imparted to me early in my career for postpartum. We like for the woman who has given birth to get up and pee within about an hour or 2 of having her baby, because that bladder can get overfull and it can cause the uterus to not be able to do its job. And so bleeding can increase if there's a full bladder. But often it's really difficult to pee when you've just pushed a human child out of your vagina. Those nerve endings are like
alien,
right? Those nerve endings are like, no, please, I don't know what you want me to do. And so actually putting some mint oil in the toilet can help.
Because it creates a cooling sensation, and that cooling sensation makes you want to urinate.
Yeah.
You Miraphors, you.
Yeah, it was a really
brilliant.
Fun one.
A note on clary sage, because you brought this up. Clary sage is one of my absolute favorite oils. It's the oil of vision. And this is what happens as we birth. It's not an oil for your first and second trimester. It's actually not even an oil for like the beginning of your third trimester. It's a transitionary oil. And so it's to be used in that way, exactly how you said, especially if you're somebody who's birthing. Otherwise, you slap that oil on you, or you slap it in the diffuser as much as possible. It is probably one of the oils that shows up the most often in the blends that I make.
I love the way it smells. It's so, yeah.
Clary
so
sage, sandalwood, and ylang ylang, like chef's kiss. It's probably...
I don't like ylang ylang.
Okay, well, let me tell you about ylang ylang. It is the oil of sensuality. That and jasmine as like the Miraphors and
jasmine.
such. used to put jasmine in their armpits and on their hair to attract their mates. Ylang ylang, also the emotional quality of it is like high childhood play, like the getting back to our childhood sense of like imagination and whatnot. So yeah, it's used as an oil to attract, to lure our suitors. And I absolutely adore ylang ylang. It's just, it's not for everybody though. It's a high floral.
And I don't think I've met any other floral scents that I didn't like, but I've encountered it in a few bath products.
Oh, this is your problem, my friend.
That's probably why. Because and it's been like homemade. Like I had a client who worked with essential oils and she made her own bath products.
Okay,
and
that's
so
fine.
It was in there, and I just was like, like I didn't actively dislike it, but there's always like this, I'm not a big fan of that smell. And anytime I feel that way and I look, I'm like, oh yeah, there's ylang ylang there again. Yeah,
there it is.
It's not for me.
Our body is innate and holds wisdom. My perspective is like, just because you don't like it doesn't mean you have to use it. You know, you don't. You get to choose. You get to choose for yourself what your body is. It holds so much wisdom for what you need. So yeah, I will use all of the ylang ylang. Don't worry.
I mean, I'd be happy to smell it again, but
yeah, I'll send you a little bottle. So anointing rituals. Let's come back to this for a moment. And this is a perfect example is talking about the birthing process. Like we're anointing the mother with clary sage to transition her into the next phase of birth, and or to becoming, the mother in stepping into that. Anybody can anoint. Let's just say that. And how you anoint is by placing some essential oils with some carrier oil, let's say in a bowl. And so one of the ways that I used to do this previously and still do, but I now have a set of anointing oils, which is the wisdom oil that I just used, is that I would make my own blend. So I'd have a bowl that stayed in the bathroom with some coconut oil that stayed in the bathroom and some oils that I used most often. And I just put a couple of drops of whatever it is that I wanted to anoint myself with. So you can choose based on emotional properties, on how you're feeling that day, on how you want to feel, any of those things. And then you dip your hand in the oil and you place them at different parts of your body. Now, you can also literally head to toe yourself in the oil. There's no like, you only swirl to the right. My preference for people who are anointing is literally just get the oil on you. Just get the oil on you. And how lovely is it to literally take something that is just like smells so wonderful and show your body such care by placing the oils all over you. So anointing practices are just like one of the most wonderful things. Now,
I think that's what those bath bombs were like for me. They're like a full body anointing without having to like even
you just do anything
other than get up and then kind of very gently patted myself dry
and lie in bed for the rest of the evening. We are done here. We have done our job.
And I'd say too, if you're feeling overwhelmed or like you don't want to have to dig up the document every time to be like, oh, what is this one for again? Smell them. Which one do you want? Let your nose tell you, because guaranteed, just like for me with tea or burning herbs for smoke medicine, I often will look up the properties after the fact, because in the moment I'm like, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to get on my phone and go down that like potential rabbit hole. I don't want to get distracted. I'm in the moment. I'm going to let my intuition and my nose tell me what I need. And then I'll look it up later, and sure enough, it's what I needed.
That's a brilliant way. This is what I always say to people whenever they're like, I don't know what to put in my diffuser. I'm like, what are you called to? What does your intuition tell you what to use? And then after you're called to it, take the tops off, smell it. Does it smell good together? And then you could use oils for spell casting, like any of these things. This is the same way. We're constantly creating spells. Really, our whole life is just a mystery that is unfolding and a myth that is unfolding in front of us. And so using get some roller bottles and place some oils in there. And as you roll those on, this is the intentions that you're setting for today.
Yeah, I love that sense when it comes to quote unquote spell casting. I remember when I started to dabble into, am I a witch? Am I interested in witchcraft? I was reading the books, and I remember the spell section of the book being it felt very prescriptive and rigid and like onerous. And that is not how I would move in the world. If that's you, do you. But if that feels like work, again, coming back to that intuition and knowing that intention setting, manifestation, giving gratitude, all of these little actions, lighting the candle and taking a moment to breathe and set an intention before your day. These are all mini spells. We cast them all the time. This is what magic is.
This is what magic is, people. Yes. This is what magic is.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about growing different herbs and plants in your backyard?
Yeah, I like this bookending of the oils with the herbs and the plants. I am the green witch. I have been for a very long time. Our house growing up, and still my mom's house, is a jungle. Like a full-on jungle. My mom has so many plants. I've inherited that love. She's also the plant whisperer. I remember growing up. So we planted some grapefruit seeds when my sister was born, and they turned into grapefruit trees. And we had a bunch of them. And I remember at one point there was one, and it was growing. It was up against a wall, and there was a picture on the wall above it. And my mom said to the plant, "Please don't grow in front of that picture." And I shit you not, the plant hit the bottom frame, went sideways, and then kept growing up.
That is witchery right there.
Right. So even though she never did garden outside, she definitely has the green witch in her as well. So I really enjoy growing my own herbs and food in general for a multitude of reasons. And I think the biggest one is just like connecting with the land and the dirt. You'll never see me gardening with gloves on. I try, I can't do it. I feel like disconnected. And there's a reason that it feels good to play in the dirt, because there's actually microbes in the dirt that are like happy hormones for us. They've done studies. Getting your hands dirty in the garden can actually improve depression. So if that's not a reason to go grow your own herbs, I don't know what is. And then also, you obviously get the piece that the soil, what's gone into the plants, there's no pesticides on them, there's nothing gross, like you are friends, you are aware of this plant. You get to know them as they grow. I always recommend, if you're harvesting or picking plants of any sort, or pieces of plants or berries or whatever, the practice that I always make sure to do is to ask permission from the plant and to give thanks or an offering. This is where borrowing some of that indigenous tradition can be really beautiful. And again, this is one of those places where the blessing has been given, like, please give tobacco back as an offering to the plants that you're taking from. So I had my friend got gifted a bunch of cigars that we don't smoke. So I've like crushed up the cigars, and I have my little pouch of tobacco that I carry with me if I'm harvesting, to offer as a thanks for the plants and the medicine they give us. So when you're growing your own plants too, there's almost this sense of, you still ask, but they've been grown for you to harvest. They're happy for that to happen. They are there. You have that relationship. It's a kind of a known relationship. Whereas sometimes when you go out to cultivate or harvest from plants that aren't your plants, sometimes they might say no when you ask, and you have to respect that. It's a lot less likely that a plant you've grown will say no. And it's just fun. I love cooking and being like, I need time. And I just go outside with my scissors instead of running to the store or getting the dried stuff. Or, yeah.
I call our backyard the grocery store.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to the grocery store and collect some things for dinner.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I don't have a big garden where I am now. I used to have a really big one, but I do have herbs. I've got my lavender and I've got yarrow, which I don't use the yarrow to cook so much, but I use the lavender. I love lavender leaves instead of rosemary in potatoes. It's so good.
Wow, you just blew my mind. Lavender leaves instead of rosemary and potatoes. I love a lavender everything, like lavender white chocolate with lemon, delicious. Lavender latte, delicious. Lavender simple syrup, delicious.
Yeah, and the leaves are just a little bit more subtle and a bit greener than floral, but they're still quite floral. So that's really fun. And yeah, just being able to go out and pick. And the bees love the herb gardens. I used to have the biggest oregano bush. Mine is getting big again, but I had this huge oregano plant by my front steps in the last place I lived. And it would just be like you'd sit beside it and you could hear the hum because there were so many bees all over it. And I was like, I need
love
some of that
this.
honey. I need some of that honey.
Yeah, where are you guys going? Where are you
Yeah.
going?
It's a really fun practice. And lots of, like, if you're in Canada listening to this, most of you probably are at this stage of the game. There's lots of herbs that grow here year round. I mean, out where Ellie is, you can overwinter rosemary. Ugh, if only. So lots of
All
things
year long.
all year long. I know. My ex, his parents lived in Nanaimo, and I remember they had a roseberry. Like, it was a hedge. And I was so jealous. If you're in Calgary, rosemary will not overwinter outside, but you can bring it in, keep it in a pot. Lavender is hit and miss in Calgary. I managed to keep it overwinter in certain places of my yard and not in other places. But definitely thyme and oregano and parsley usually comes back. It's a biennial. It only gives you a plant like every other year. So you need to plant one year and then another the next year, and then you should always have parsley. Chives are great. You can't stop them from coming back. Hot tip, if you don't want chives everywhere, pick off your chive flowers, make vinegar with those, make syrups with those, put them fresh in salads. Just don't let them fall to the ground in your garden, because they're every single little seed in that flower, which there are many, many, will turn into its own plant.
I love this. I love this moss witch, kitchen witchery that is going on. As we look at different herbs, it's so great to see you lit up about this.
It's so fun. I just want to be in a garden all year. All year.
I just picked the last of all of my green tomatoes that were still on the vine last night. And I had this moment. My lover was like, I picked the tomatoes, and she came in with these like 4 massive tomatoes. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go snoop around to see if there's any more. And I came in with like a half of a 5-liter bucket full of tomatoes, like just lots of tomatoes. And she was like, I didn't see those. I'm like, I just know how to find every single last tomato on that plant. Like, nothing is going to waste.
Yeah.
I also want to offer up that, yes, offering to the land. One of the things that I learned when you're gardening and when you're picking your herbs and your whatnot, and a great thing to do is to learn about permaculture, like how we can offer to the land so that it starts to feed and we give it what it needs. And rotating your crops is also part of this, like depending on what you're planting where. I think we should also note that mint is something that is super invasive. So if you have mint, then you're going to plant it, and you're going to plant it in the ground. You're going to plant it in a pot and then in the ground. Otherwise, you have mint everywhere.
Or you're going to be like me, where I don't know if anybody's following my stories on Instagram, but you may have seen my mint root pile, because I went out last week before the weather turned here to plant my garlic, and I inherited mint with this house. It was already in the ground, and it grows where my lavender grows, and it just happens to also be where I plant my garlic. And so I had ripped it out and like dug it up probably a month ago. And there was no more greenery above ground, but in all the areas that I had totally dug down and pulled out the roots, it was just like a mat of roots. So I regularly rip out tons of mint roots, to the point where I'm like, there's no way this plant is coming back. It's coming back.
It's definitely coming.
It's coming back.
It is coming back.
Always.
Always, yes. Yeah, so giving back, you can even give back, like one of the tomatoes that was on the vine last night had turned semi-red, but also had started to rot. It was touching the ground, and we had a bit of rain and cold. And so offering that back to the land as well is a great thing. Also offering it back to the land, and then maybe next year you're going to get more tomato plants because your tomato has composted in the area that you offered it to.
Right.
That's the cycle of life here.
Yeah. And then just that little tip as well, if you're out and harvesting, not in your garden, making sure you never take the first of something you see or the last or all of it, right? Only taking a portion, to make sure that you're not taking the only one, or if it's really not abundant, you don't want to be weakening a population of plant. And that's where that asking comes in. If you get a no, like, deal with your disappointment and say, okay, maybe next time or maybe somewhere else.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, shall we shift away from speaking about our sacred tools and get into some topics that are a little bit more fun, as this is the day before Samhain and our tradition of Halloween? You want to tell me a little bit about some veil thinning stories? Do you have any?
Yeah, I do actually. So I've been mentioning the last couple of weeks that I've been offering these soul council sessions, specifically while the veil is thin. And it's been really interesting. So the period of time that I was taking as the thinned veil was that October 15th, it started to thin, and it's going to start to get thicker again after tomorrow and returns to its kind of normal thickness, as it were, around the 10th of November. But it's been so cool to see what comes through for these sessions. So typically your spirit guides are not your ancestors. Your ancestors are guides and they are in the spirit realm, but they're not spirit guides because spirit guides have ascended. Usually they're like not reincarnating anymore, or at least for a while. So when you call a soul council, usually you're calling in spirit guides. Sometimes it's animal guides. Sometimes it's like dragons and fairies. We had a fairy show up last week, which was cool. But what's really neat to see right now is that I would say easily half, actually a little more than half of the people who've come to do a soul council session with me, they've had ancestors show up, and quite quickly. So that's been a really neat experience. Like they're extra present, they're right here with us, and they're wanting to come through and give those messages. And something that I'd love to note, one of the people that I did a session for asked me beforehand, and I really liked this question, like, how are we ensuring that we're not getting the ancestors who aren't healed or who haven't done their work or who maybe don't have my best intentions at heart? Because that's something to note about ancestors too. Some of them are really loving and benevolent and have your very best interest at heart. And some of them might not have been very nice people. I think we might have mentioned this when we were talking about it the first time, but they may not, they have their own agenda for healing, and doing it through you and living some of that out through you is what they want to do. So when we do call a council, I always set the intention, just as I do with any energy healing, that it's only good healing and guidance in a good way. Only guides that are for your best good and highest interest and have done enough of their own healing work, if they're ancestors, that they're going to be good, a good influence for you, and have your highest good at heart and be able to move you towards it too.
I love that some ancestors are just knocking on the door.
It's so cool. It's so fun. I love it. It's been really, really interesting to see, and just to see the different experiences. I've had people all the way from like Reiki masters who drop in really quick and access those guides. It's easy for them to get to that space. But I've also had a few people who've never had any healing work done, who've never connected with spirit guides before, who maybe don't really fully believe in spirit guides, and we're still getting some really cool wisdom and insight coming through. It's been a super fun process.
I love this. I love it so much. For me, in this period of time, I've been using my dreams. So setting intentions before I go to bed of anybody who I want to call forward, which of course a lot of the time is my late father or grandmother or anybody else that needs to come through. And I'm using this as a time to gain insights for anything that I'm currently struggling with or currently feeling like a little stuck on. And so before I go to bed, I will say things like, listen, everyone, anyone who can hear me right now, I am really feeling stuck or blocked in this area. What is it that I need to know? And the dreams that I've been having are so vivid and so wonderful. And it's just so lovely to have an opportunity to see people, in quotations, to see people who are no longer in my life on the manifest plane, on the material plane here, and to have access to some of the things that they've been saying. And I think that you can access this really quickly, as well as a practice through meditation and just setting that intention of whoever needs to come forward to me and give me the nugget of truth that I need to know. Yeah, I really love using my dreams, especially around this time, to gain access to our ancestors. So to call that into any practice that you might have.
Yeah, and a really fun practice if you're listening to this on Monday or Tuesday and it's not Halloween yet or Samhain. There's a really interesting practice I read about recently, and stop me if I said this last week, Ellie. I think I may have told you about it, but I don't think we recorded it. I'm taking a Celtic course on the Wheel of the Year just to deepen my knowledge. And one of the practices that the woman teaching it gave was to place a chair near to the hearth. And that the chair near the hearth in ancient times would have been, or not even that ancient, before centralized heating, the chair nearest to the hearth was the prized place, right? It's the warmest place in the room, especially in the winter as we move into this dark and cold time. And actually, a lot of homes would have a bed out in the main room right near the hearth. It was called a biddy bed, and it was for the grandmother or the grandfather. I think grandmothers were around more often than grandfathers. Women have a longer lifespan and they're needed, but it was for the elderly to be in the only place in the home that would be warm or warmer through the night, because there weren't usually hearths in each individual room, right? You might take some heated rocks into your bed and then like bundle the covers up. And so a really cool practice at this time, when the veil is thin, when the ancestors are present and near, is to place a chair near the hearth, the fireplace, or if you don't have a fireplace in your home, which many of us don't, you could place it in the kitchen near the oven, or you could light a candle and let it burn for a while before you go to bed. Please blow it out before you go to bed. And this chair is for your ancestors. You could write a letter and leave it on the chair if you're wanting to seek some guidance or just speak to this person or these people you're calling in. But it's that really lovely gesture of you're welcome here. I'm thinking about you. Here's a place for you.
I love this so much. We do have a hearth in our home. And so we do have a chair that sits because it's the prime location, it's the prime seat whenever the hearth is on. So I will be writing a letter to place on the chair before bed to invite anybody who wants to come and enjoy the fire to come and enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll be writing a letter as well. I'm going to have that as part of our ceremony, which has passed once you're hearing this, but on Samhain, the celebration, we're going to all write letters to our ancestors to do this practice too.
So great. So great.
So good. Yeah.
Why don't you tell me a little bit more about what's going on for any of our listeners? How can they work with you over the next little while?
So many things, all the things. So the big one that I've mentioned several times, actually, there's two big ones now. The Soul Council sessions, they're still here. They're still awesome. I'm having so much fun holding these for people. And the feedback I'm getting is really, really lovely. People are really getting a lot of depth and comfort and knowing out of these sessions. The price will be going up on November 10th. Right now it's $85. So hop in while the getting's good. And then the other exciting thing that's coming up is that I'm running round 2 of Unleash Your Inner Witch, a beginner's guide to light witchcraft. And if you're enjoying this podcast, I guarantee you will love the course. Again, I'm getting I cried when I asked for some feedback and testimonials from the women who are in it. The messages I'm receiving are just so lovely. I spoke to one of them yesterday and she said, we're spending so much time doing all this heavy, hard inner work. And she said, this course has been so fun and light and delightful and enriching, but it's not heavy, right? We're not picking at old wounds or finding those traumas. We're having fun and learning and enriching our lives with magic as we go through. So that waitlist is open right now. And to hop on the waitlist, you just shoot me an email or send me a message on Instagram. People who are on the waitlist and then who choose to sign up. So being on the waitlist does not mean you've committed. It's just that I'm interested. And if you're on the waitlist and you do sign up, you'll get 4 bonuses. You'll get an invite to my Yule ceremony, which is in December. You will get a free mini distance healing session with me. I did a few of those over the last weekend. And again, I had some really cool feedback from people just saying that they were really helpful and spot on. And you will also get a Soul Council session. So if you think you're going to want one of those, you can hop on the wait list. And if you decide to sign up, you get one for free. And there's something else. Ooh, a pendulum. I'm going to pick a pendulum for everybody who joins. I'm going to tap into
pendulums.
you. Yeah, tap into you and your energy. And I'm going to hand pick a pendulum and send it your way with a little note. So that is that Unleash Your Inner Witch wait list. And then I'm going to run a free masterclass as well the week before Unleash starts up, called Embrace Your Inner Witch. I've run it before. It's like a reclaim your voice, manifest abundance by healing your witch wound. So we talk about the witch wound, the history, why it affects us, how it shows up, all of that stuff. And that's kind of like a mini tease of what we go into in Unleash Your Inner Witch as well. How about you, Ellie? What have you got on the go for us?
I have a few things that are coming up as well. First, I want to speak about something free that's coming in November. A friend of mine has this really wonderful somatics, breathwork, yoga membership, and she's invited me to come and speak to Sacred Pleasure. And so she also asked me if I would like to invite any of my community to come into this. This is an offering inside of her membership, but any of my community can also come and be with us. So it's Thursday, November 14th at 7 p.m. Pacific. I'm really excited to just talk about the sacredness of pleasure, just talk about pleasure in general, how we can add more pleasure to our life, debunk some beliefs about pleasure itself, like, I'm not in the mood or I have a headache, which was not a myth, but why those things might be coming up for us whenever pleasure or communion is an invitation. So stay tuned. I'll put the link for that in the show notes. And then I also put something up for the season that is Tarot After Dark. Tarot After Dark. And I don't know if you know this concept of After Dark, but this is when the lights get turned down low, what happens? And I have this really excellent erotic tarot deck and another deck that I tap into for sacred sensuality. And so I've placed Tarot After Dark sessions up for grabs that are $33 from my site that you can get, and I'll pop the link in here. And so we'll just go through, like, this is what we need to know about pleasure and relationships and what's going on for you. And I'm so excited about those sessions. It's a fun, playful session.
So juicy.
And then finally, speaking of fun, playful, and mysterious and sensual and all of the things, the Scorpio season workshop, actually, the ceremony has changed to Saturday, November 4th. And this is an opportunity for you to come in. And actually, I want to speak to a lot of people. We hesitate to go towards the kind of extreme of Scorpio. Us Scorpios, we're steeped in this and in our everyday life. And then we have shadow work that seems to be very intimidating to a lot of people. And the shadow work that we'll be doing is really an opportunity for us to shed light on things. So it's not going to be a heavy workshop. It's not going to be a workshop where we need to go see our therapist and take a week off. This is not the Scorpio season that we're entering here. This is really an opportunity for us to bring to light a few things and to flush them out of our system as we move forward. And this will be a really great ceremony for anybody who has not experienced this type of ceremony before, or even if you have been experienced in sitting in circle or ceremony, this is going to be just a great way to integrate into the Scorpio season. And I am here for this. So I'll pop that link down below as well.
Yeah. All of the links for both of our stuff will always be in the show notes so that you don't have to go hunting it out.
So I guess we should wrap up this episode with a very deep, deep thank you for all of our Woo crew that have been listening each and every week and that have been messaging us. We should probably start doing some shout outs on the site as we move forward towards a little hint here, moving forward towards a Patreon platform for this website. So stay tuned, more details to come. But we've been receiving so many messages from you, and please do not stop sending them. We love hearing from you. If you love this podcast, go ahead and leave a 5-star review wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. And just thanks so much.
It's so fun to connect and to hear from you and to share with you. And always, if you have questions, follow up from an episode, or there's things you want us to talk about, please just let us know, because we are always happy to integrate conversations around what you're curious about.
Thanks so much, everybody.
We'll see you next week. And I keep saying, see, we'll hear you, you'll hear us.
We'll see you next week.
Until next week.
Until next week is exactly it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.